Hello everyone, welcome to Module 2, Lesson 2 of Zero to Permit. And in this lesson, we're going to talk about the second core element of a permit application, and that is the permit processing fees. Now, fees are important since it doesn't matter if you submit a complete application that has all the forms and a detailed engineering evaluation. If you don't submit the proper fees, then your permit can't be issued. And in fact, your application can be canceled. And that's moving actually in the wrong direction. And so that's not good. Therefore, it's important that you determine and submit the proper fees needed to process your permit application. And so to help you out, we've actually put together a 6-step procedure to a basic fee calculation. There are other types of fees. There are other fees listed in Rule 301, and there are even more fees listed in Rule 306. But that is all outside the scope of this seminar. Within this seminar, we want to show you the fee calculation that you'll use about 80% of the time when preparing a permit application. And so we call this the basic fee calculation, and there are 6 steps. And so let's get started by running down each of these 6 steps. We'll then come back to talk about the specifics of each one. So number 1 is to determine the type of application being submitted. Number 2 is to determine the type of Rule 301 equipment that you are permitting. Number 3 is to determine the base fees required based on the type of permit application that you're submitting, as well as the Rule 301 equipment type that you have. Number 4 is to determine if there are any fee modifiers that apply to your piece of equipment. Number 5 is to determine if there are any facility permit fees due in order to process your permit application. And then number 6 is to simply calculate the grand total, which would be the sum of the steps that we just discussed. So those are the 6 steps that we're going to walk through within this lesson. And so let's get started. Step number 1 is to determine the permit application type or type of permit application that you're submitting. There are generally 4 types of permit applications that you can submit to the AQMD. There is general permit processing, or the general permit application, a change of condition, a permit modification, and an admin change. The general permit processing fee, or the general permit processing, is a standard fee to permit new equipment. And so this is the permit application that you will use to permit a piece of new equipment. There's also the change of condition application. And that is a permit application to request a change to one or more of the conditions that are noted on the face of your permit. There's also a permit modification alteration, which is a permit to modify how an existing piece of equipment operates. Now, this category is pretty common because it constitutes any physical modification or alteration in a way that a piece of existing equipment operates. And so since a lot of people have existing permits and they may want to make changes to how that equipment operates, then this is a pretty common application. I would say it's probably the most common, or the second most common behind the general permit or the new equipment permit type. And then you have the administrative change. And this is a permit to change either typos or minor items on the face of your permit. And generally, a test to determine if something can fall under the administrative change permit or not is if it will increase the emissions of your equipment, or the change will require some sort of engineering evaluation by the district or by the person preparing the permit application. And so those are the 2 general ways you can determine if a permit can be sort of classified as an administrative change or not. If it will not increase emissions and it will not require an engineering evaluation, then a permit application can be submitted via an admin change. However, if it does increase emissions or it requires an engineering evaluation, then what's most common is that you'll need to file a permit modification instead. So step 2 is to determine the type of Rule 301 equipment that you are permitting. Now if you go into Rule 301, and you'll find that there's two tables of, lists of equipment, and they're provided in two tables, Table 1A and Table 1B, and each contain a lot of different types of equipment. And so what you want to do here is you want to place the piece of equipment that you have into one of the equipment types listed in tables 1A or 1B. In the AQMD vernacular, permitted equipment can be split up into two types: basic and control. Control equipment is anything that would control the emissions of air contaminants, and then basic equipment would be anything that is just not a piece of control equipment. And so pieces of basic equipment include engines, boilers, and spray booths, and so on. And then control equipment would be a scrubber, a thermal oxidizer, a waste gas incineration unit, gas scrubbing units, and so forth. And so what you want to do is you want to look through tables 1A and 1B the best that you can, and then place your piece of equipment in the equipment category that you'll have. And you want to do this because each Rule 301 equipment type will have a schedule associated next to it. And this schedule is important for determining your base fee. And so here's actually a picture of table 1A. And so what you want to do here is that if you have a lead, an asbestos abatement system with a HEPA filter, then that would be a Schedule B. On the other hand, if you have an electrostatic precipitator at a restaurant, then that would be a Schedule B also. However, if you have a flare system from a refinery, then that will be a Schedule F. And so the point here is that you want to take the equipment that you have and put it into one of the Rule 301 categories because you really want the fee schedule. And so in step 3, you'll want to determine the base fees based on the application type as well as your fee schedule. Therefore, you'll want to take the equipment or the type of permit application that you're submitting, and that's from step 1. And then you want to take the fee schedule from Rule 301 that you determined in step 3, and then you want to determine the base fee associated with that permit application or that combination based on the correct table. And so in this step, what you're really trying to do is you're trying to really match the equipment application type, so that's on the top here listed on this table, to the schedule, which is listed to the left, to determine the base fee. And so in this example, if you had a Schedule B piece of equipment and you were submitting a change of condition, then your base fee would be $1,201.14. But on the other hand, if you had a Schedule D and you were submitting an alteration or modification, then the base fee would be $5,293.03. Likewise, if you had a Schedule D piece of equipment and you're permitting it as new equipment, then it would be the same amount, $5,293.03. On the other hand, if you have a change of condition for a Schedule B, then it's going to be $1,201.14. Now, the one permit application type that is not listed here on this fee chart are the admin changes. So if you go back to this chart, you can see that this chart only has permit processing fee, change of condition, or alteration modification. Admin changes are not listed here. And that's because admin changes are listed in Rule 301, Section C3C. And those are broken out by fee schedule as well. And so again, if you have a Schedule C and you want to submit an admin change, then the fee is $792.43. However, if you have a Schedule A and you want to submit an admin change, then it's $580.25. Now, when it comes to all the fees in Rule 301, it's important to remember that these fees go up every year starting July 1st, and it's based on the CPI. And so you want to make sure that when you permit a piece of equipment, when you determine the fees, that you determine the fees using the right or the most current Rule 301, because the fees can go up, or the fees actually do go up every year. So in step 4 of the process, you'll need to determine if there are any fee modifiers that apply to your permit application. And so the short of it is that a base fee can be modified based on a specific situation. And in general, there are 6 basic fee modifiers. And we're going to talk about these 6 modifiers so that you can have a general idea of when a modifier applies and when it doesn't. There are more, but these are the 6 basic ones. And so case number 1 is a higher fee associated with failing to first obtain a permit. In this case, the fee increase is 150% of the base fee. Now in this case, an example here is that you've installed a piece of equipment and you did so without first getting a permit under Rule 201. And then for whatever reason, usually because you got a violation or notice to comply, now you want to submit a permit application for your equipment. But because you've already constructed your piece of equipment and it's in operation, then you'll have to pay a higher fee for not first obtaining that construction permit. And so in this case, the fee modifier is 150% of the base fee. Case number 2, or modifier number 2, is a small business discount. And so this is, again, a discount from the permitting fees. And if the business meets the definition of a small business in Rule 102, then they can apply for this discount. Now, that typically means that there are less than 10 employees, and then the company is making less than $500,000 in gross receipts per year. And so if you qualify for that, then you can subtract 50% off the base fees that you've previously calculated. And so again, this is a discount. And it's a discount for small businesses. And in case 3 is an identical equipment discount. And so in this case, the discount is 50% of each piece of identical equipment being permitted after the first one. And so the key here is that they need to be functionally identical pieces of equipment. And so using this fee modifier, you'll actually pay 100% of the base fee on the first piece of equipment, and then subtract 50% of the base fee for each additional piece of equipment. Now for this to work, you have to remember that your equipment needs to be functionally identical. And so as an example, 2 engines that are exactly the same make, same model, same rating. Or 2 boilers that are exactly the same in terms of make, model, rating, burner, manufacturer, and so on. And so again, when working with this modifier, you'll end up paying full fee on the full base fee on the first piece of equipment, and then you will actually subtract off 50% of the base fee for each additional piece of equipment. And so in another example, if you had 50 engines, then you would pay 100% of the base fee for engine 1, and then you would pay 50% of the base fee for the next 49 engines. And so that's the third fee modifier, is that the identical equipment discount. Case number 4 is a discount for equipment that was previously exempt from Rule 219. Like we talked about earlier, the process for determining if a piece of equipment requires a permit is to really look at 3 rules: Rule 201, 219, and Rule 222. Actually, it's 4 steps, but it's 3 rules. You look at 201, you look at 219, you look at the exemptions in 219, and then you look at Rule 222. Now, the important thing here is that if you find that your piece of equipment is exempt, then you want to document the exemption, or the fact that you went through the effort to determine that this piece of equipment was exempt, and then you want to craft that memo, file it, in your records. In addition, you also want to continue to track Rule 219, because Rule 219 is like any other rule that the Air District has, in the sense that it can be modified or amended in the future. And when it gets modified, sometimes pieces of equipment are added, so more pieces of equipment are exempt or become exempt, or some pieces of equipment are taken out. That means that less pieces of equipment are exempt from permitting. Now, if you fall into the second category and you had a piece of equipment that was previously exempt from permitting, and then now the rule changes, and because of that rule amendment, you're now required to file a permit. Now you have a piece of equipment that was previously exempt under Rule 219 that now needs a permit. And so in this case, the discount is that the fees are due, or the base fees due, are going to be 100% of Schedule A in Table 1, regardless of the equipment type. And so it's a huge discount for some pieces of equipment, but the fact is, or the key is that it needs to fall into this one specific category where the equipment was previously exempt, and then now because of a rule amendment, this piece of permit now, or this piece of equipment now needs a permit. Case 5 is a discount for replacing non-identical equipment destroyed in a state of emergency. And so in this case, you had a piece of equipment, but it was destroyed in a state of emergency, and now you want to rebuild. In that case, there's actually 0 permit processing fees to do that. And so that, again, that's a discount. And then in case 6, the last case here, is higher fees if you want expedited permit processing. You know, oftentimes you can request to have an engineer work on your permit application on his or her overtime or on the weekend. And when you do that, you're expediting the processing of your permit application because you want your permit faster. And so if you want your permit faster, then it does come with a fee. And the fee increase is that if you want expedited permit processing to get your permit faster, then you're going to have to pay 150% of the base fee. And that's simply additional fee because now you are authorizing the permit engineer to work on overtime, on the weekend, on their day off, in order to get your permit out faster, and so you have to pay for that effort. And again, that additional fee is 150% of the base fee. So moving along into step 5, once you determine that there is one or more, or maybe no fee modifiers that apply, then in step 5, you want to determine if there are any facility permit fees that are needed for your permit application. Now, depending on the type of facility that you have, you may have a facility permit. And if you do, then you'll need to file a facility amendment fee or facility permit amendment fee. Now, these types of permits are usually granted to Title V facilities or facilities in the Title V and Reclaim program, because those are the 2 permitting programs that have facility permits. And again, this fee is really there to amend the facility permit. And so as you can see here from this table, if you are in a reclaim facility and you are only in the reclaim program, then the fee to modify your reclaim permit is $997.27. On the other hand, if you are in both programs, the reclaim and Title V program, then the facility amendment fee is $1,994.53. And so the point here is that you'll have to add these facility permitting fees to the other fees that you are determining within this step of the permit preparation process. And so once you do that, then step 6 is to simply calculate the grand total. And to do this, you're going to just go back and sum all the fees that you've determined in the previous 5 steps. And now you can go back, you can calculate the grand total by hand, but it's also good to check your work against the AQMD's fee calculator. Now, I'll have a link to the fee calculator in the notes below, but the fee calculator, very simply, is just an app that you can use to calculate the fees for your permit. And it's a nice little app. It works. It really helps when trying to double check to see that you have done the fee calculation correct. It's really cheap insurance to be sure that your fee calculation is absolutely correct. And so again, we'll have a link to the fee calculator in the notes below, and you can try it out on your next permit application. So in summary, there are 6 steps needed to determine a fee or a permit processing fee. And so let me just run through the steps one more time. Number 1, determine the type of permit application being submitted. Number 2, determine the Rule 301 equipment type that you are permitting. Number 3, determine the base fees based on the equipment type and application that you have. Number 4, determine if there are any fee modifiers that apply to your permit application. Number 5, determine if your facility needs to modify their facility permit and thus submit additional fees to do so. And then number 6 is to simply calculate the grand total. Now, to help you out, you can check out, we have 3 examples that we've produced to help you get into the rhythm of determining the permit processing fees for your application. You can go ahead and do the calculation longhand and then check your work against the answers that we provide, or you can go ahead and check your work against the fee calculation app on the AQMD's website. And so with that, we've just covered the second core component of a permit application. We'll see you in the next lesson. We'll talk about the engineering evaluation. Take care.